Welcome back, 1121. I'm Doug Pagitt Radio here on AM 950, joined by Michael Hyde, who's a professor at Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. He's written a book called Perfection, Coming to Terms with Being Human. And he suggests in the book that the pursuit of perfection is admirable, and it's one of the human qualities, and it's something that makes us human. It makes us great. It makes us connect with one another and with God. But it's also quite humbling, and it's also a difficult pursuit and needs to be handled as something powerful and something that needs to be tended to carefully. And I think that Michael's suggesting in the book that sometimes there's parts of our culture that doesn't help us do that very well. That there are driving forces that push us toward a level of exceptionalism that can actually be quite damaging to us. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit here. I'm the parent of two young adults, a 20-year-old and 19-year-old, and an 18 and 16-year-old that are still living at home. And I will hear quite often, I've been the parent of 4 teenagers, it doesn't have to be perfect, Dad. Right, so this whole notion, like every kid sort of realizes that if they could throw perfection into the mix, they kind of win the argument about how clean the bathroom is supposed to be or how well their homework is supposed to be done. But then on the other hand, with college students, there is this drive of competition and this drive of success, and especially in the elite world of higher education, to just push harder and harder and harder and be better and better, and both of those worlds can be quite damaging, huh?
I think so. I mean, there's in one case, and you'll recall I used the example of the Seinfeld show
Yes.
in George Costanza,
Yeah.
who was a character that I never really was a great fan of. But I mean, Costanza is somebody who's rotten with imperfection. And he even says, and I quote him, he says, "My father was a quitter. My grandfather was a quitter. I was born to give up."
Yeah.
Which is a great. And we've been there. I mean, there are times when things are just not going well, and you don't even want to get out of bed.
Yeah,
I mean, it can be that. But if you don't get out of bed, you're dead meat. You have to be able to act. You have to be able to tap into that desire to be something more than you are at that moment, or you're lost.
Right.
Well, we have that about us. We have that about us physiologically and spiritually. But we can take it too far, and that can be the rotten with perfection. And as a college educator, I mean, I see that a lot, as I said earlier, with students who, I mean, they're now in an environment where they're not the number one student any longer, or they're not the best sports player any longer,
right?
Or they're not the person who looks the best. I mean, that's the other thing with looks and kids. And so you have this in culture. I mean, culture has definitely constructed a script of what perfection should be. It's gotten to the point where if it's not perfect, it's pathology.
Oh, yeah. You make that point in the book. I think that's quite interesting to say that imperfection becomes a pathology for people.
Very dangerous. Very dangerous way to be, especially if you're one of the people that are being marginalized by any group or any rule or any set standard that says this is what you have to look like to be acceptable.
Right, and I know that we've seen even in the 20th century some very dire consequences and places in tribal communities around the world where if a certain expectation of a child, either by gender or in physical perfection, that the consequences of that can be genocide and can be quite dangerous.
Right, exactly.
And you suggest that those kinds of results of human behavior are actually connected in some way to a misunderstanding and misrepresentation of perfection.
I believe so. I mean, that would very much be my argument. We still have. I mean, what I have a chapter in the book, as you know, called "God on a Good Day."
Yeah, God on a good day. Yeah, that's a great phrase.
And it's a phrase taken from the vernacular down here in North Carolina, and I give that credit to be sure.
Yeah.
But it forces the issue of, wait a second. Well, God's supposed to be perfect, so what would God on a good day be like?
Yes.
We have yet to really figure out as a species All right, what exactly we mean by this is perfect or this is good. Our conceptions of perfection are still very much victimized by strange, cancerous ideas. That's going to take time for us to evolve beyond that and to come up with a language, be it spiritual or whatever, that gets us through that.
Well, and I think one of the interesting things you also bring up, and I think that the fact that you teach in the School of Bioethics and Health and Society at the School of Medicine there at Wake Forest, is this whole issue of bioethics, and I think that the world keeps moving so fast, we don't really have time to put together the proper concepts of all of this, and in some ways you're suggesting that the bio the whole bio industry, whether it has to do with people or with food or with medicine, that really needs to incorporate a deep consideration of what do we mean by perfection, because sometimes our reach can extend our grasp, right? We can reach things that we shouldn't.
Exactly, one, and two, it already has. I mean, this is what is so fascinating, and why this issue of bioethics, right, which is there because of what we can do with all our science and technology. You can design your own child now to a certain extent. I mean, you talk about the problems that people have with abortion.
Yes.
Then this is really going to bring it more and more and more into the open.
Yeah, it's really.
I don't want to say what's right or wrong here, but it's going to force the issue. We have to be prepared to talk about that.
Yeah.
Do you want to redesign your kids and then take that responsibility?
Yeah, and I guess it also then plays out at the end of life issues, right? Where people, and in some ways, this kind of view of perfection, I know you bring this up in the book, doesn't give us a good way to think about the end of life or death. It starts to interrupt what would otherwise be normal patterns. Because it used to be I would hear things when I was a kid, and I'm 43, so I would hear things when I was a kid about how like the mid 70s, 72 or 76 was sort of the average age someone would live to be. Right. Well, now when people die at 72, many of us feel like, oh, that's so early. You know, there's an extension and a set of expectations about how life is supposed to be, and how we deal with disease and how we deal with our own health and so on. And so it's going to have public health implications.
No, so, my wife is in geriatrics, so every day when she goes to work, she's a kid.
Yeah, right.
I'm an academic professor. Every day I go to work, I get older and they stay the same.
Yeah, you're an old guy. You're getting old. How about that?
They constantly replenish their ranks, all right? We live in a culture where age is not something that is usually considered to be real positive, especially as you're getting older and older. Are we going to be able to change that? We already have. All right? Are we going to be able to extend lives longer? Without a doubt. Can we afford to?
Yes.
That's one. There's an economic problem.
Yeah.
And how are we going to? We can't look what's happening in the country today. We can't solve the healthcare crisis now. What's going to happen when we have more elderly people? And we're going to have that.
Yes.
That is going to come about, yes.
Well,
will that be perfect? It all depends how you want to define that term. Human beings, we don't know. We seek it, we desire it, we want it, and we want it oftentimes for the good, but we have yet to really understand, to put it in spiritual terms. And it says in the Bible, isn't it? You come face to face with God, what happens? You die.
You die. Michael Hyde is the author of the book Perfection, Coming to Terms with Being Human. You ought to pick it up. In fact, if somebody's really interested in it, give us a call over here at 952-946-6205, and I'll put a copy in your hand. Michael, thanks so much for being here on the show with us today, and thanks for your book.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the time.
Pagitt Radio. Give us a call if you'd like the book, 952-946-6205. We'll be back with natural health coach Shelley Pagitt right after this on Pagitt Radio on AM 950. And